Let's just get right into it, y'all. This past weekend, I cried to my partner, full on tears, because I was feeling something I didn't quite have language for at first. It was like this mix of guilt and sadness, and it was heavy. And I realized what I was sitting with was something a lot of people never talk about when they're on a path of building wealth or just finally getting a little bit more than they're used to. It was survivor's remorse, that feeling of why me, that whisper of do I even deserve this, that ache of who can I share this with who won't secretly feel some type of way. And what triggered it honestly wasn't some big thing. It was just a few small reminders that I've outgrown spaces I used to feel so safe in. And it hit me all at once. That's what today's episode is about. How we need to stop normalizing broke culture and broke mindsets.
She's not just a podcast host. She's a movement.
Manda Lea is teaching people how to break cycles and build real wealth, mentally, financially, and spiritually.
People all over the world are waking up to her message.
Wired to be Rich isn't just a podcast, it's a mindset shift.
She makes you believe again in yourself, in your power, in your ability to actually have the life you always known was meant for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Manda Lea, entrepreneur, speaker, and founder of Balance and Destiny, and this is Wired to be Rich.
There's a certain culture that forms around not having enough. Whether you want to call it broke culture or survival culture, or just how we grew up, there's an unspoken bond that forms when people are used to figuring it out together. You split meals, you vent about bills, you laugh at the shared chaos, and then suddenly you're not in that space anymore. Not because you think you're better, not because you're trying to leave people behind, but because you've worked, prayed, healed, and aligned your way into a new season, and it looks different, and it feels different, and it gets lonely sometimes. I've been in both realities. I've been the girl who was scared to check her bank account, and also the woman who's built something solid enough to stop spiraling every time an unexpected expense comes up. And let me tell you, both versions of me felt deeply. Both versions were worthy. But the more you step into stability, the more you realize how many conversations are rooted in lack, how many people bond through mutual doubt, not mutual vision. That's where the disconnect starts. That's where the survivor's remorse creeps in. And the truth is, nobody celebrates struggle. But what I've seen is that we're often more comfortable with people surviving than we are with people thriving. Not because we're jealous, but because we don't always know what to do with change. We're used to the hustle. We're used to the middle. We're used to making it work. So when someone steps out of that rhythm, when someone says, I actually want more, or I'm not available for burnout anymore, it can feel like they're abandoning the group, even when they're not. That discomfort with wealth isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as subtle as mere comments. Sometimes it's just a silence after you share a win. Sometimes it's just the feeling that you have to water yourself down so no one feels left behind. But what I've learned, and I'm still learning, is that real growth will ask you to let go of guilt, especially guilt that isn't yours. It'll ask you to stop internalizing other people's resistance as your responsibility. And it'll stretch your heart enough to hold both gratitude and grief at the same time. Gratitude for where you are, and grief for the versions of you who don't have access to it yet. This isn't about money itself, it's about identity. It's about how we are taught to feel when things get easier, and how we question that ease instead of receiving it. Because somewhere along the line, we all started believing that struggle equals sincerity, and that success has to come with a side of apology, but it doesn't. You don't owe anyone an explanation for growing. You don't need to perform stress just to stay relatable. And you're not selfish for wanting to live life with softness, stability, and space. I'm saying this out loud so that someone else can stop shrinking in silence. Because the truth is, we don't talk about survivor's remorse enough. We don't talk about how hard it is to carry joy when you know people who you love are still trying to survive. But you're allowed to be happy. You're allowed to expand. You're allowed to be the one who made it out and still hold compassion for those who are figuring it out. That doesn't make you disconnected. That makes you human. And if nobody's told you this, it's safe to keep going. There's something that happens when your life starts to change that nobody really warned you about. It's not glamorous, and it definitely doesn't make for an aesthetic caption. It's this weird ache that creeps in when you finally start living the life you used to dream about. And instead of feeling completely free, part of you feels like heavy, like you're carrying something you can't really talk about without it sounding ungrateful. This weekend, I felt it heavy. I was sitting with my partner, and out of nowhere, I just broke down full on tears. I wasn't sad in like the way that you may think, but my body needed to release something. And when I sat with it, he made me realize it was survivor's remorse. The quiet guilt that shows up when you realize you've made it out of a reality that so many people you love are still stuck in. And you don't know what to do with that. It wasn't about one moment. It wasn't even about money directly. It was about realizing how far I've come and feeling like I didn't know who I could fully share that with without it being misunderstood. It was the awareness that while I'm grateful for what I've built, it doesn't feel as light as I thought it would. It was the realization that every level of growth requires a layer of release. And sometimes that release is relationships. Sometimes it's your identity. Sometimes it's just a version of you that knew how to survive and now has to learn how to feel safe in stability. And we don't talk about that enough, not as a collective. We talk about the grind, yes. We talk about manifesting the lifestyle, but we don't talk about the weird emotional fog that shows up when the life you were praying for finally starts becoming real. It's very strange. The same rooms you used to want to be in now feel kind of isolating. You catch yourself minimizing your wins to keep conversations comfortable. You hesitate about sharing something exciting because you've learned how often celebration makes people quiet. And it's not that you're trying to distance yourself from anyone, it's that your life started moving at a pace that not everyone wanted to match. And that's not shade, it's just reality. And I think that's where the remorse comes in. You're not trying to leave anyone behind, but you can't slow down every time someone else stops walking. You can't shrink every time someone flinches at your expansion. At some point, you have to let yourself receive what you asked for without apologizing for it. Because the truth is, people say they want freedom, but not everyone's prepared for what it actually costs. The cost of being misunderstood, the cost of having less people to call, the cost of realizing that the conversations you used to find comforting now feel limiting. Again, not because you think you're better, but because you're not pretending anymore. And that can feel isolating at first, especially when you've spent most of your life bonding through survival. You start to see how scarcity creates community, but it also creates a ceiling. It creates this invisible contract where everyone agrees to keep playing small just to stay close. And when you stop playing by those rules, things shift. Sometimes people fall off. Sometimes you're the one who has to quietly pull away. That doesn't make you cold and it doesn't make you fake. It makes you someone who's growing. And growth by nature is separating. It doesn't always come with applause or clarity. It often comes with silence, grief, and the work of learning how to receive joy without guilt. So if you've ever felt that tension, if you've ever found yourself crying in a moment that's supposed to feel like a celebration, I want you to know that you're not broken. You're just adjusting. You're learning how to carry lightness in a body that spent years bracing for impact. You're learning how to hold peace without thinking it's a setup. And that takes time, but it's worth it because this season is not about proving anything. It's about allowing, letting your nervous system catch up to the abundance you created, letting yourself be supported, letting yourself evolve without guilt, because you're not a bad friend or a sellout or too much. You're just in a chapter where playing small doesn't fit anymore. And the more honest you are about that, the more peace you'll feel. Now, let's talk about something that comes up a lot when you start shifting your relationship with money, even just with wanting more. And that's judgment. Not always loud or obvious, but it does show up in subtle comments, sometimes in a silence after you share a win, like I said earlier, or just in a hesitation to fully be transparent about your lifestyle or choices. And I want to name this gently again because it's not always coming from a bad place, but a lot of that judgment isn't really about you, y'all. It's projection. Most of us have experienced it both ways, being the one who felt triggered by someone else's abundance, and the latter, being the one who's triggering someone else just by showing up fully. And what I've learned, especially as I've started making more money and creating more ease in my life, It's that a lot of people aren't necessarily anti-wealth or anti-soft life or even anti-luxury. They're just unsure of how to access it themselves. And instead of being honest about that discomfort, sometimes it's easier to pull away, poke holes, or make quiet assumptions. And I say this with compassion because I've done it too. I looked at someone else's life and thought, how did they get that? I felt that mix of curiosity and self doubt and didn't always know how to move through it. So I get it. But what I've also learned is that when people don't name those feelings, they can turn into low grade resentment toward people who've done nothing wrong except step into what they're ready for. That's why I don't take it personally anymore when someone questions what I charge or how I travel or why I invest in what I invest in. Because I've also seen how quickly people stop asking those questions once they feel empowered themselves. Once they're in motion, once they see what's possible, the energy shifts. And if you've ever found yourself on the receiving end of that judgment, or even if you've caught yourself being the one who's feeling weird around someone else's success, I just want to say that is human. You're not wrong or broken for feeling that friction. It is not shameful. It is just an invitation to pause and ask yourself, what does this bring up for me? Do I want that too? And if so, what would it look like to give myself permission to move toward it? Because what I've found is that people who feel grounded in their own potential usually don't spend a lot of time dissecting other people's choices. They're too focused on building, on learning, or becoming. And they're not triggered by your clarity, they're inspired by it, even. So, if you're in a season where you're finally saying yes to things that used to feel out of reach, whether that's hiring help, increasing your prices, booking the flight, resting on a weekday, or even just dreaming a little bigger, I want you to know it's okay if not everyone gets it. It's okay if it feels weird at first. It's okay if some relationships shift as your vision expands. That doesn't mean you're doing too much. It doesn't mean you've changed in the wrong way. It just means you're growing. And sometimes growing means you will have to hold space for your progress while others catch up to theirs. We're all on different timelines, and that is okay. The people meant to move with you will adjust, and the ones who can't, well, that is their process to navigate. But your only job is to keep going. Now, something to starts to shift when your relationship with money when it becomes grounded, when you're no longer operating from survival, when you start making decisions from a place of clarity instead of fear. You might still be building or still stretching or still figuring out what abundance even looks like for you, but even that space starts to feel different. And one of the biggest things I've noticed as I've moved through that shift is how quiet the judgment becomes in certain rooms. People who are secure, and I mean like financially, emotionally, or otherwise, tend to have nothing to prove. They're not watching your every move and they're not reacting to your growth. They're not silently questioning your decisions. They're focused on their own lane and they're glad you focused on yours. That level of peace was new to me. For a long time, I thought I had to explain everything, every choice, every dollar, every shift in direction. I thought wanting more meant I had to justify why, but being around people who think long term, who really understand investments, and who expect expansion, it taught me how much of that explaining was rooted in environments where lack was the norm. Because when you spent most of your life navigating scarcity, ease can feel foreign, and it makes sense. Wanting better, desiring softness, taking care of yourself in ways that aren't rooted in emergency is all a different frequency. But the more you're around people who live in that frequency, the more you start to realize none of this is outrageous. It's actually very normal. They don't blink when you say you're prioritizing peace. They're not confused when you say no to the things that drain you. They don't need a PowerPoint presentation on why you're moving differently. They just get it. And that understanding teaches you a lot. Without anyone needing to even say a word, you start noticing what wealth really looks like. And when you experience that energy, you start making decisions from that place. Not because you're trying to impress anyone, but again, because you're finally able to listen to yourself. Wealth isn't always about a number. It's the ability to choose and the ability to walk away when something doesn't align, y'all. The ability to rest without spiraling, to say, this matters to me without needing validation. It's emotional spaceness. It's self-trust. It's peace. And maybe that's the biggest lesson. The point isn't to prove anything. The point is to be so connected to what you're building that you no longer feel the need to explain why it's yours. Now, if you take anything from this episode, let it be this. Being broke isn't noble. Wanting more doesn't make you greedy, and wealth is not something you have to apologize for. You don't have to explain your desire to be free. You don't have to shrink so your dreams don't make someone else feel inadequate. You don't have to pretend you're content living check to check just because it makes other people feel safe. We are not doing that anymore. This platform is called Wired to be Rich. And it was never about just chasing money for aesthetics or proving points. It's about liberation. It's about full spectrum living. It's about showing women and men what it actually looks like to expand into everything that you all were told was too much. So if you've been playing small, taking yourself or talking yourself out of abundance, or filtering your wins because you don't want to offend anyone who stayed where you left, this is your reminder that you didn't come this far to stay stuck in someone else's comfort zone. You came here to overflow. And if this episode spoke to you, if it gave you language for something you've been feeling, or reminded you that you're not crazy for wanting more, share it. Send it to someone who's outgrowing old narratives but maybe hasn't found the words yet. And if you haven't already, leave a review. As you all know, I love when y'all drop comments also. Rate this episode, tag me, whatever feels aligned. It helps Wired to be Rich reach more people who are ready to live fully, freely, and without apology. And if you're looking for deeper support as you navigate your own glow up, professionally, energetically, or financially, visit www.balancedestiny.com. You'll find tools, strategy, and ways to work with me that are designed to help you shift into the version of yourself you've always known was there. Again, that is www.balancedestiny.com. www.balancedestiny.com, because you're not here just to survive. You're wired to be rich, and we are just getting started. I will see y'all next week. Thank you. Bye.